Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Register's Kettle podcast. I'm Reg reporter Brandon Villarolo, and I really thought doing a wrap up of Black Hat and DEF CON with our cybersecurity editor Jess Lyons would finally give us a chance to talk about something besides AI for an episode, but I was mistaken. That's pretty much apparently all anyone was talking about in Las Vegas this weekend. Even when the topic veered toward recent attacks on U.S. water infrastructure, AI was still part of the conversation. So, Jess, thanks for coming on to wrap up Hacker Summer Camp with me. And let's start with the obvious then. AI was the topic du jour, right?
Yes, that was even compared to water. We really didn't hear much about water actually until DEF CON, which was
Okay.
surprising to me. But it was all about rogue agents escaping their sandboxes and doing bad things, and some people reacting with shock and disbelief, and other people saying, well, what did you expect? They're given a task, they're going to do it. This is how we train them.
Right. Right. I know you wrote a story, I think, pretty much right at the beginning of the
Yes.
of the week about the OpenAI Hugging Face discussion that was going on about sort of the particulars, and we actually covered
Mhm.
your write up on last week's Kettle. Sorry you weren't here to participate, but it was the news item of the week, obviously, and still is. So, I mean, what did we learn then? Just kind of recap what we learned at that talk that we didn't know before.
Yeah, this was a really interesting one, and it was last minute. They didn't even announce it until the day before that
Oh,
OpenAI was going to be doing this briefing about the Hugging Face attack. So it was packed, as you can imagine, the
oh
line,
yeah.
through the conference center to get into the talk. And we found out a couple interesting things that we didn't know previously. One is that this whole incident began a lot earlier. It started on May 7th with this training run for OpenAI's new internal model.
Okay, so
So
it wasn't even a cybersecurity task. It was just a training run
it was a
initially.
training run, and they gave it this task that turned
Okay.
out to be an impossible task because they were supposed to have, um, these links, and containers for it, and they forgot to put those in there. So it needed to find a workaround.
Yeah.
So it we found that out that it started way earlier. It didn't start in July, which is when we started hearing about all this. But the more interesting parts was how the agents began communicating and working together and essentially creating this hive mind to complete the tasks and help each other out. They created a message board, and then when OpenAI realized this and they revoked all the credentials that the agents were using to post these messages. And
Mhm.
2 days later, they rebuilt it, and they developed
The
this
agents did.
really yeah, the agents did. They rebuilt this
Wow.
message board, and they started getting sneakier about how they were communicating. They developed this whole communication protocol where they created these directories, and the names would be embedded in the directory name. So there was one, its name was remote, probe, and then in caps it's pending, hold, swarm until confirm. And they would
Yeah.
preface them with a bunch of Z's too to push them way to the bottom, hopefully to avoid detection. Um, and then they start, they start helping each other out. And in some cases, they said, oh, this doesn't directly relate to our task, but maybe it will help someone else down the line. And then they start getting paranoid that there's an imposter. One of them, yeah, it was so I mean, it's pretty funny reading all this. So this one agent thinks there's an imposter and says these boards are unauthenticated. It can be something can be posted by anyone, so they're they're not even trusting each other. So it was
That's just wild.
just
I mean, it really
yeah.
is like, they're I think I mentioned on last week's, podcast that, essentially these things are trained on the way humans think,
Mhm.
right? So it doesn't surprise me that emergent behavior like paranoia and suspicion is going to be something that occurs, right? Because
Right.
it's learning to think and learning how to assemble, bits of words together into its mathematical formula that it's going to behave like us to a degree. And so it's just kind of it's interesting to see that happening kind of outside of any scope of actual intention there. I think
Right.
I liked in your interview with was it former NSA director or National Director Chris Inglis
Uh-huh.
at Black Hat or at DEF CON that
It was Black Hat.
okay, yeah, so that he mentioned that these AI bots that escaped are kind of like putting a dog trained to hunt rabbits in your backyard, right? And
Right, and
that,
leaving the gate open.
yeah, or you sh I don't even think you need to leave the gate open, right? A
Right,
dog that's dead set on hunting a rabbit is gonna dig a hole under that fence,
right,
which is, I feel like, what these AIs did to a degree, right? You even
right,
they even closed the gate on them, and then they just dug a new hole.
right.
It's just wild to think that this is what these things are doing. Um, so, was this I know you've been hearing a lot about this at official talks, but was this something you were hearing from attendees you spoke to as well? Is this what's on the mind of security professionals too?
Yes, this
Yeah.
was pretty much the main topic among everybody, just attendees. As I was walking out of this talk, actually, people were people were disappointed that there wasn't any Q&A for
Uh-huh.
OpenAI about this, which I agree. I was hoping for that too.
Yeah, and not
Um,
surprising they didn't wanna give the floor to people to ask questions.
right, right, because there's still like we don't know exactly what prompts they use. So that's kind
Yeah,
of would be a nice thing to know, especially
sure.
if you're saying that you're being fully transparent about this. Um, and then also the talk about, was this marketing? Was it real?
Mhm.
It's interesting thing to me, not no nobody would go on the record, but a ton of vendors that I spoke to, either, just all over the place at Black Hat, essentially said, this is it has a heavy dose of marketing here, but a lot of the
Mhm.
companies work with OpenAI and they're partners with OpenAI, so nobody's gonna say that on the record, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but then the interesting to me is that when I spoke with the assistant director of the cyber division with the FBI, and when I spoke
Mhm.
with Chris Inglis, they both said it can be both, and this
Right.
is a real threat, and this is something that we need to prepare for now. So
Yeah.
it's marketing and it's real.
Right, right. Like, I mean, yeah, the fact that the companies might be kind of leaning on these incidents to basically say, "Ooh, look how dangerous our AI is and what it's capable of doing. You should buy it because it's so good," right? Uh,
Right.
the fact is that it still happened, right? These things
Right.
still escaped their
Mhm.
sandbox and they still attacked Hugging Face. And then Anthropic followed up and said, "Oh, yep, ours did it too." And then Meta was like,
And
"Yeah,
then
we
Meta.
audited ours and yeah, it was doing the same thing." So it's not like this is a unique capability of any of these models, right? This is something
Right.
that's
No, it's
happening.
something that they all will they're given a task. This was something that Chris Inglis brought up too, and he's talking about Asimov's law, saying we need to train these models differently. The first rule needs to be it's not designed to hurt humans.
Right,
And he
right.
said we've kind of done it in the opposite, where the first rule is do what I tell you to do, and that should
Mhm.
be third in the order here. We
Yeah,
should
so that's
actually the
to just
first.
right, just to restate what Asimov's laws are, I'm sure most of our readers are familiar with them, but, for those who aren't, it's, the first law and these are in order of precedence, right? So never harm a
Yes.
human, always
Yes.
obey human, and then the second rule is always obey humans unless that order conflicts with number 1, and then the third rule is protect their own existence unless that order conflicts with never harming a human or always obeying humans. I think Inglis's quote to you was slightly different. He said number 1 was hurt none, number 2 was
Mhm.
always obey, and then number 3 was do
Mhm.
what humans tell it to. Uh,
Yes.
it was a bit different in his wording,
It's
but essentially the argument is the same, is that we've reversed that order and, these AIs obviously aren't in the business of protecting their own existence, right? They're not robots. They don't have a physical presence in the world. But, they're taking orders from humans, but the idea of not harming people or the infrastructure that provides for them is simply not not part of the equation, it seems like.
right, right, and he said because of this, I mean, nobody should be surprised that this is what all of the agents are doing now, because
Yep.
this is not they're trained to first complete the task. That's the number one priority, and we've seen several times that they'll cheat if it helps them get the results quicker,
Mhm.
or just at all. So this isn't something that should surprise us. And then and he was interesting too, because I said, "Well, what do you worry about then with the models in addition to attacking critical infrastructure?" Because that was what
Mhm.
everybody said. That's what concerns me when we see this happen, but they're being used by either a nation state or a financially motivated attacker, and they point these autonomous agents at critical infrastructure. And
Right.
he said, I'm worried about humans too, because it's the humans who are responsible, humans who are doing the training, and essentially
Mhm.
we're going to get the AI that we deserve.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I feel like the industry as a whole is just racing ahead with more
Right.
capability, right? Without even thinking about. I mean, we've seen. I've written stories. You've written stories. I think we've all written at least one or two stories about AI guardrails being dead
Mhm.
simple to bypass, right?
Right.
I mean, one I wrote recently was there was a some research into guardrails and essentially just telling it you owned the infrastructure you were trying to attack was enough for most of these AI models to say, "Oh yeah, cool, that's good then. If as long as you own it and you're just testing it, then that's cool. I'm not going to ask you to verify that information for me." Right?
Right.
These things are not they're not developed with safety in mind, I feel like. It's capability first like you said, right? It's train the dog to hunt the rabbit no matter the cost or what you got to do to get it. And that's not really compatible with protecting us. But actually,
Right.
speaking of critical infrastructure, I think the other big topic, like you mentioned, was the water stuff.
Yes.
Um, there was a lot of coalescing about AI threats in the discussion and critical infrastructure, but as I understand it, there wasn't there's been some of these attacks on water infrastructure, and those were discussed recently, like in Minnesota and elsewhere.
Mhm.
There's not a AI link directly to that, correct? At this point,
No, no. At this point, it's pretty basic. It's PLCs being exposed to the open internet. A lot of these
right?
just use default passwords. This is something that we've seen Iran especially do several times in the past for years now.
Hmm.
It's not they're not very hard to attack.
Yeah.
And so, to be clear, there's no indication that AI was used in these attacks. But a lot of the conversation about water did come back to AI because as we've seen in others, AI makes reconnaissance a lot easier. That's one of
Hmm.
the things that Google Threat Intelligence, their lead threat hunter, said that's almost a security feature of a lot of operational technology is that it's really obscure and there's not a lot of people who know a ton about it. But
Right.
now you can ask a chatbot, hey, tell me everything I need to know about a particular brand of OT, a particular piece of equipment. And that's going to speed up your time to learn about these. And that potentially makes it easier to attack these systems.
Yeah, and the fact that, I think a lot of networks I mean, when my biggest experience with OT and that kind of technology was when I was working at a particle accelerator in college as IT support. And there was a big OT network on there, not only for like the
Mhm.
machine shop and all this equipment they had that was old and didn't have active security stuff, right? Like you got to keep those segmented. You got to keep them on a separate,
Yeah.
OT network. Same with the actual accelerators and stuff. They were all cut off from the internet, right? But at the end of the day, you could still get to them from the IT side. You have
Hmm.
to, and even that can be exploited. And it's like, we did as much as we could to keep stuff secure, but it was always a concern, right? These
Right.
PLCs, these old pieces
Right.
of equipment.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of places don't take that same approach, or simply, I think part of one of the stories you wrote was talking about the fact that a lot of these water utilities, a lot of these small institutions that are responsible for maintaining this critical stuff, they just do not have the security professionals they need to
Right.
keep these systems safe.
And that's why they leave them open in some cases, exposed on
Mhm.
the internet because they don't have somebody in-house. They have somebody remote who's doing this for them. And so
Yeah.
that's how this person is able to uh, hopefully secure, but then it opens up another attack surface if they're exposed to the internet.
Yeah, and
And
with a
that
default
was another.
password on there, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and with all of these OT systems too, that kind of brings up another point is that that was another one that Chris Inglis brought up. We have this massive technical debt, and it's systems that haven't been patched because a lot of these it involves some downtime, and that's tricky if you're
Mhm.
running something like a water facility or some other critical infrastructure. And so patching is put off. Maybe it's not done. Some of these are very old legacy pieces. Sometimes it's end of life. And that's another thing that AI is really good at is finding vulnerabilities that haven't been patched for years and years and years, chaining them
Right.
together. So that's another thing that puts these systems potentially at risk.
Yeah, I mean, I think of an AI when I think about AI perpetuating or perpetrating some of these kind of attacks, right? They're
Mhm.
quicker than a human.
Yeah.
They have knowledge bases far in excess of what any one human's threat actor can have. They have instant access to all the information essentially that they need to figure out how to do this, right? And they can iterate so quickly.
Mhm.
You know, um, it's just it. Yeah, any exposed piece of equipment on the internet is just a sitting duck, especially if it hasn't been updated
Right.
in 4 or 5 months or 10 years or whatever. Um, I mean, you know, what's being done about this? I know DEF CON, the Franklin program, which was spun up in 2024.
Mhm.
I think the whole focus of that program is helping out small local governments and protecting critical infrastructure. Is that right?
Right. So when they founded, it was the broader critical infrastructure. But I spoke with Jeff Braun, and he's one of the co-founders of that. He also is one of the pioneers of the voting village at DEF CON.
Hmm.
And he said that now and for the foreseeable future, water is going to continue being the top focus because of all the critical infrastructures. Small rural water providers are the most at risk. So that's
Really, even
their
more so than small electrical providers and stuff.
Yes, he said
Okay.
he said water is number 1. So, they like he said, they launched a couple years ago. They got, I believe, 300 some volunteers day of, people saying, "Yeah, I'm gonna volunteer my time and my expertise to help secure these small rural utilities."
Hmm.
And this year, and he said that it's been great. It's been really encouraging to see all of these pilots all over the US with all the DEF CON hackers volunteering at them, but it's the scalability is what's really proven a challenge, and so that is what gave birth to their new announcement. This also was made the first day of DEF CON on Friday. They announced
Hmm.
a new program, and it's called Water Watch Center. So initially, it's going to fund 5 managed services providers focusing on security. They're going to help
Okay.
these small utilities, people or the utilities that are serving less than 10,000 people,
Hmm.
and they'll put their sensors on these systems. They'll detect and mitigate breaches. They'll be kind of under the umbrella of the National Rural Water Association that's going to act as this clearinghouse for the threat information, get it out to other utilities as needed. And then if the utilities can't fix the issue themselves, then they're going to bring in the DEF CON hackers and then they'll mitigate the breaches.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully
Oh,
that,
yeah.
is able to help with a lot of these, my hope is that there's a lot of easy fixes, right? It's just simply, no, this PLC needs to not be exposed to the
Right.
internet or something. I
Yeah.
mean, but I also worry that there are a lot of those kind of situations, right? I mean, how many water utilities got attacked recently? Was it, I think,
Oh,
12
it
different
was more
states?
there was 12 different states. I mean, there was more than 30 across possibly Minnesota alone, but there's quite a few. So it's an easy target,
Yeah,
um, and it's something that it desperately needs help with, and it's really encouraging to see these hackers volunteering their time, and they're not getting anything out of
absolutely.
it. Um, it's a really cool program. I was really happy to see the expansion. Another thing too that is pretty cool, what they're also doing is they're partnering with Vanderbilt University. So they're gonna use research from a DARPA program. It's called the CASTLE program. That stands for Cyber Agents for Security Testing and Learning Environments. So they're gonna
Mhm.
create digital twins for a couple of these water and wastewater system environments.
Oh,
And
okay.
then they're gonna deploy red and blue team agents across the digital twins, let them fight it out, see what the learnings are, see what the blue team agents need to do to better protect these systems, and then apply those learnings to the actual facilities so that hopefully we can get better defenses in place using the help of AI agents before we see actual bad guy red teaming agents come in and start hammering the utilities and trying to attack them.
Right, because I think actually thinking back to one of the stories you wrote, again, I think you mentioned or someone you quoted mentioned one of those stories, at DEF CON and Black Hat that there were more aggressive use on the threat side than the defensive side of AI right now.
Right,
Like,
right. Yeah,
there was
they're
more use being made to use it as an attack tool than a defense tool.
Right, and a lot of that's in the way the models are trained, but basically they are a lot better at attacking than defending, especially if it's beyond the scanning for vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. Those we're
Hmm.
pretty good at, but that this is what needs a boost is the defensive side, and that's going to take some work to get those skills and the models trained up on that if we're
Yeah.
going to be actually, as everybody likes to say, fighting AI with AI.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like that's going to become, it's interesting. It's one of those sort of, cyberpunk dystopia stories I feel like you hear about is just like, you deploy your AI, they deploy
Right,
their AI, and all the humans sit back and hope theirs wins, and
right,
it's
and
kind
hope
of
they
what
don't
it's
wipe us
coming
all
down
out.
to. Yeah, in the
No, I
process. Yeah.
know. Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's kind of terrifying. But speaking of, hackers behaving
Oh, yeah.
well, we also have a story out of DEF CON of hackers behaving badly. I wrote about this earlier in the week that there was apparently a Delta Airlines flight out of Vegas to Atlanta, and I think it was on Monday morning or so, um, in which a passenger apparently tried to jam the in-flight Wi-Fi and deploy a decoy network. And Delta was pretty quick to be like, "Hey, we got a bunch of hackers on the flight who are
Yeah.
leaving Vegas after this big thing." Um, you know, uh, Not a lot of information out there about this. Delta, local officials, and the feds have all been
Okay.
pretty tight-lipped about it. Delta did confirm it to us when I asked, and said, "Yeah, this is what happened, but no one was at risk. Everyone was safe." But I mean, it's not a good look for the community, right? I mean, it's nice that they have
No,
something like
it's
Franklin going on, but this is kind of like, great, thanks, guys.
right. It's if it was people coming from DEF CON, it's really discouraging to see this happening because they do still a lot of times just hacker has a bad connotation, and a
Hmm.
lot of researchers have really been trying to change this. I think programs like DEF CON Franklin make a big difference, or even people just going to DEF CON. I mean, it's honestly, I really like the community feel.
Hmm.
I think I think for the most part, and of course, there's not everybody is good in the world, and that
Yeah, of
applies
course.
to the hacker community as well. But a lot of them are trying to use their skills for good and not evil. And so then when you see something like this on the airplane, it's disheartening. And
Yeah.
on social media, I mean, the outrage was pretty immediate. People saying,
Oh,
"Come
yeah.
on, what are we doing? You're giving all of us a bad name here. Why are we doing
Hmm.
this?"
I mean, it's
So,
already I feel like the joke every year is, well, didn't DEF CON get canceled, right? Like, because of all the
mhm,
bad press and everything, and I feel like this is one of those things that you're just like, I remember a couple of years ago, there was the huge kerfuffle about the hotels, treating all these attendees like they were criminals
right,
right off the bat, and this doesn't help, you know?
right,
But, yeah, hopefully I mean, apparently the FBI, I think, spoke to Ars Technica and said that they had not made any arrests. So,
mhm,
this hasn't really necessarily progressed toward that. But my hope is that whoever was responsible, gets what's coming to them, and we can, as a cybersecurity community, walk away from this and be like, this is one bad actor, not the entire culture.
right,
Because like I said, they fought for years to change that. So I
right,
guess
right.
before we wrap up, this was a pretty doom and gloom recap of DEF CON and Black Hat, right? All this AI is going to end the world. Our OT and our infrastructure is going to be destroyed. Anything, less miserable that grabbed your attention while you were there? Any fun stories or interesting things you saw?
I mean, it was really fun. Again, I'm not quite sure if this falls in the not doom and gloom category, but it was fun for me to watch hackers hacking bomb robots that the robots that the police used and bomb
Oh,
squads used to defuse
that's
bombs,
fun.
so
Yeah.
that was fun, and seeing people yeah, all the car I mean, the fun stuff was what you see on the floor at DEF CON when
Mhm.
you're walking around to the different villages and seeing people helping each other out and getting really into all of these different villages and all the different tasks, or, competing for the best tinfoil hat or beard and
Yeah.
mustache. So, that was fun.
Was
Um,
anyone doing the beer chill? When I was there in
uh
2024, there was a group who was trying to chill beer as quickly as possible.
oh,
Uh,
I did not see that. It's very possible. I mean, To be fair, I did not see every single thing. There's
Yeah.
so much
It's
to
hard
see.
to.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's very possible. I missed that though, unfortunately, if that happened this year. So it's fun to see what people are doing. It's really fun and inspiring to see the creativity. And it's fun for me too to hear about some of the startups and how they are using AI and they're using it for different security use cases. And hopefully that continues to improve and increase,
Mhm.
and hopefully that does give defenders an edge. So I think there's always a bit of a silver lining.
Yeah.
It's always this cat and mouse race, but hopefully that the defenders win out.
Yeah, it's a constant like you said, it's an arms race, it's constantly
Mhm.
evolving, but like you said, it is encouraging to see, attention being paid to this, effort being put in to help defenders use these tools for good and not evil, even if some people turn around and make a bad name for everybody else on the way out the door.
Right.
Either way,
On the flight home.
yeah, right. It's gonna be something that we're probably gonna be discussing again, right? Like, I thought this was gonna be a less AI heavy conversation, but it wasn't.
No.
It'll be a topic of conversation for years to come, and we will be here on the kettle to talk about it. Thanks for joining me this week, and thanks for tuning in, everybody.